Welcome to our channel. Today, we're diving into the post-apocalyptic world of Shadows Over Redwood, a tale that tests the limits of courage and sacrifice. At the very end of this story, you won't believe how Mia confronts Janko in a dangerous face-off that decides not just her own future, but the fate of everyone in the tribe. Will she stand victorious, or will the warlord finally crush Redwood's hopes once and for all? You'll have to listen to the entire story to witness the pulse-pounding conclusion. If you love thrilling narratives brimming with tension, unexpected alliances, and explosive showdowns, then stick around. This one's for you. While you're here, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on more gripping tales just like this. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below sharing your personal take on the characters, the setting, or where you prefer to listen. Your support helps us bring you even more great stories. It was said that once upon a time, Earth thrived with towering cities and endless fields of green. There were roads stretching across continents, oceans teeming with ships bearing goods from every corner of the globe, and billions of people so closely connected that the planet felt small. They called it the modern age, a golden era. But then came the collapse, a chain reaction of wars, epidemics, and environmental disasters that picked civilization apart piece by piece. No single cause triggered the downfall. It was as though all the tensions of the old world converged into a perfect storm. Generations later, the Earth was forever changed. Survivors huddled in small communities, scrounging for resources amid sun-scorched plains and twisted metal skeletons of former cities. Some regions turned to radioactive deserts where the ground glowed faintly at night. Others were merely barren expanses dotted by skeletal trees and thorny shrubs. In the Redwood Basin, a winding valley once famous for its towering redwood forests, humans clung stubbornly to life. The Redwood tribe had established itself along a freshwater stream that cut through the valley, a rare commodity in a land where water could be the difference between life and death. Their settlement was a cluster of wooden huts constructed from fallen redwoods, with thick bark serving as crude insulation. Although the Redwood tribe prided itself on independence, in recent months, survival had grown increasingly difficult. A series of harsh summers and nearly non-existent rainfall dried up surrounding fields. Crops failed, game grew scarce. Tensions began to simmer within the tribe. The Redwood leader, Chief Amon, carried a somber weight on his shoulders. He was well respected, having guided his people for many years. But even his leadership offered little solace when nature refused to cooperate. Every day, the water level in the stream appeared to sink lower. Within this community lived Mia, Chief Amon's only daughter. She was 19, quiet, and known for her pensive expression. From a young age, she had a gift for tending to small animals. Birds with broken wings, foxes limping from snare traps. Any injured creature that stumbled into the tribe's territory seemed to find her. More than once, Mia's mother would wake to discover her daughter in their hut, carefully cradling an injured bird or half-starved puppy. While many admired her compassionate nature, others worried she was too soft for the harsh realities of the New World. In normal times, Mia would have had her pick of suitors from neighboring tribes or from within Redwood itself, had Redwood actually allowed visitors and stable trade relationships. But times were not normal. Janko, a hardened warlord of sorts, led a roaming group of heavily armed survivors. His people, if one could call them that, made their home in the rusted hulls of old transport trucks, battered vans, and scavenged motorcycles. They traveled from settlement to settlement, offering protection and precious resources in exchange for what they wanted. And what they usually wanted was tribute, food, labor, or occasionally wives. Chief Amon, until recently, had managed to keep Redwood relatively free from Janko's influence. The Redwood Basin was not on any major trade routes, and Janko's roving clan preferred easy targets with well-established farmland. But desperation changed everything. The Redwood tribe found itself dangerously short on rations. Sickness began to appear among the elderly and children, hinting that malnutrition and disease were creeping in. One sweltering afternoon, Janko's scouts appeared at the outskirts of Redwood's territory. They carried precious supplies of grain, medication, and fresh canisters of water. Amon's pleas for help were plain to see, even if unspoken. But Janko, in his silent cunning, already knew Redwood's plight and recognized a valuable opportunity. After a series of tense discussions, Janko made an offer, a large shipment of grains and basic medicine, enough to sustain Redwood for months. Weapons, rifles, pistols, ammunition gleaned from old military caches to defend against raiders. Access to specialized seeds that might grow even in the parched soil around the basin. In exchange, he demanded Mia's hand in marriage. For Eamon, the negotiation was humiliating. He understood Mia was more than an asset. She was a human being, his daughter, beloved in the tribe. Yet he also saw the entire Redwood community on the brink of collapse. In the old world, such a transaction would be unthinkable. But in the harsh reality of the post-collapse era, desperation trumped dignity. Though Mia was unaware of the exact terms, she sensed her father was troubled. She confronted him late one evening, after the tribe's usual meeting around the council fire. Eamon stood at the edge of the stream, staring out at the stars. Mia approached with hesitation, heart pounding. "Father," she said softly, "I can tell something weighs on you. Let me help." Eamon forced a smile, but it was weak. He held his daughter's hand, calloused and cold from washing clothes in the stream. He told her of Redwood's impending disaster, that they lacked resources, that children might die if nothing changed, that sickness would soon claim even more lives. He stopped short of describing the exact price Janko demanded. But Mia was no fool. Rumors circulated that Janko had a liking for pure wives, girls untainted by the various diseases or radioactive exposures, unmodified by black market technology, unscarred by violence. And everyone knew Mia was uncommonly healthy. A day later, Redwood's people awakened to see Janko and his men caravanning away, leaving behind supplies and a promise to return for his bride. Mia stood near the main gate as Janko's vehicles rumbled off, dust clouds rising in their wake, an unsettled feeling twisting inside her chest. The tribe's relief was immediate. No longer starving, no longer out of medicine, but the price to be paid hung in the air like the thick, dry heat of midday. She wanted to scream. How was it possible that she, a living soul with thoughts and feelings, had become a bargaining chip for the survival of many? But Mia was not heartless. She understood Redwood's desperation. She had lived among her people all her life and loved them as they loved her. Perhaps, she told herself, this was simply the cost of keeping everyone else alive. That night, as she lay on a straw-filled mattress, sleep eluded her. She pictured Janko's cold, calculating eyes and the way his mouth curled into a predatory grin. She felt his presence like a looming shadow over Redwood's fragile existence. Some part of her soul rebelled at the idea of becoming his property. Yet another part whispered to her of duty, sacrifice, and the teachings her mother once passed down. That caring for the tribe meant placing communal welfare above personal desires. Her mind drifted across half-formed plans. Perhaps she could flee. But Redwood was home to her entire family, and she couldn't vanish into the waste without endangering them all. Could she sabotage the deal? If so, Redwood might lose Janko's favor, and the warlord could retaliate. Eventually, the burden of these thoughts pressed down too heavily. She rose before dawn, leaving her hut to walk by the perimeter fence, a barrier made of ragged metal sheets and wooden stakes. The night air was chill against her skin, and the starlight cast an eerie glow over the settlement. She stared out at the silent plains. It was then she caught a flicker of firelight beyond the boundary, deeper in the darkness. A stranger's campfire, perhaps. Little did she know, this stranger would become the key to her dilemma, the spark of hope she never imagined she needed. No one in Redwood had mentioned a traveler approaching, so Mia felt wary. She pressed a palm against the rough wooden post of the fence, leaning forward to squint at the faint glow. It appeared to be a small campfire, flickering behind a crumbled old billboard that once advertised candy bars. Her curiosity piqued, Mia glanced around to be sure no one was watching. The tribe's sentinels didn't usually patrol this far from the main gate until the first hint of daylight. She slipped out through a gap in the wooden stakes, an area scheduled for repairs but often overlooked. The ground outside Redwood was cracked and dry, dotted with weeds and strewn with debris from what might have been a highway decades ago. As Mia drew closer, the warmth of the campfire tugged at her. She crouched behind a rusted metal sheet, peering at the occupant of the makeshift campsite. The figure sat on a log, wrapped in a threadbare jacket, hood pulled low. A battered backpack and a rifle lay within arm's reach, a clear sign of caution. Mia didn't see anyone else, nor any vehicles or traveling companions. The stranger stirred, pushing back the hood. In the glow of the fire, she could make out short-cropped dark hair flecked with gray at the temples. The face was weathered, with lines of hardship across the brow and around the mouth, but not unkind. A small canteen hung from the belt, along with various pouches that likely contained survival gear. She considered retreating. Redwood discouraged contact with outsiders, at least without permission. And yet, she could see a quiet weariness in the man's posture, an exhaustion that reminded her of a wounded animal. Something inside her urged caution, but also compassion. Her foot scuffed a loose stone. The small noise was enough to alert him. In one fluid motion, he grabbed the rifle and dropped to a knee, scanning the darkness. Heart racing, Mia held her hands up, stepping forward. "I'm not armed," she called softly. "Please don't shoot." He kept the rifle raised. "Who are you?" "I'm from Redwood," she swallowed, forcing her voice steady. "Saw your fire. Thought I'd see who was out here." Slowly he lowered the rifle, though his grip remained tense. "Just passing through," he said, his voice raspy, as though from disuse or dehydration. She took another few careful steps. "Is that all?" His eyes flicked between her and the perimeter fence in the distance. "I've traded with Redwood once or twice. A few years back. Maybe. They weren't exactly welcoming." Mia offered a hesitant nod, stepping closer so the firelight fell across her face. "Times haven't gotten any easier. We're cautious." His gaze lingered on her, perhaps noticing her simple attire, a rough sponge shirt and trousers patched at the knees, and the faint shadows under her eyes. "What's your name?" She found herself answering before she realized the risk. "Mia." He gave a small, almost reluctant nod. "I'm Frank. Used to be a soldier, before." His voice trailed off as though the memory was too heavy. "Now I roam, scavenge, trade if the settlements don't shoot me on sight." Mia relaxed slightly, though she remained wary. "If you're looking to trade, Redwood might reconsider. She paused, uncertain how much to reveal. "We just got new supplies." Frank studied her expression. "From Janko, I'd guess." The mention of that name made Mia tense. "You've heard of him?" "Hard not to," he sighed. "He's building a nasty reputation, forcing smaller groups into alliances they can't refuse. Takes what he wants under the pretense of trade or protection." She felt a hollow pang in her gut. "He offered Redwood resources we badly needed." Frank's eyes narrowed, but not in anger, more in understanding. "You must be in dire straits to accept that devil's bargain." Her cheeks warmed at the bitter truth. Unable to hold his gaze, she stared at the wavering flames. The silence hung between them, broken only by the crackle of burning wood and the distant rustle of wind over the wasteland. Eventually, Frank cleared his throat and set the rifle aside, though still within easy reach. "You should go back," he said gently. "It's dangerous out here, especially before dawn. This is no place for a tribe girl to wander alone." She almost laughed at that. "It's no safer inside Redwood, trust me." But her tone lacked true humor. He tilted his head. "Meaning?" She opened her mouth, about to blurt out the entire story. Janko's demand, her father's dilemma, her own sense of betrayal. Then she hesitated. She hardly knew this man, and yet she desperately needed someone to talk to, someone who wasn't under Redwood's unspoken code of silence. Despite her turmoil, she decided to hold her tongue. "It's complicated," she whispered. "Listen, if you come to Redwood by daylight, maybe you can trade. My father, Chief Amon, he's more open to commerce now that, well, we have supplies to spare." Frank gave her a long, searching look. "I'm not sure Redwood's folk want me around, but I'll think about it." Mia nodded, her mind swirling with unanswered questions. "I should go," she said at last. "Your fire's bright. You might want to put it out soon. Raiders sometimes patrol about these parts." He made a low grunt of acknowledgement. As she turned to leave, he called after her softly, "Mia, be careful." She paused, giving him a sidelong glance. "You too, Frank." Slipping back toward the fence, Mia felt her pulse still racing. The encounter was brief, but something about Frank's guarded kindness made her chest tighten with a mixture of hope and longing, emotions she couldn't afford with Janko's presence looming over the tribe. She wondered how many travelers had crossed Redwood's path over the years, and how many had simply been turned away out of fear. When she crawled back through the gap in the fence, the first faint light of dawn had begun to pale the horizon. Mia returned to her hut quietly, mindful not to wake her father, but she suspected he was already awake, troubled by the same sleepless worry that plagued her. As she tried to rest for an hour or two before her daily chores, one thought consumed her. Maybe, just maybe, a stranger's appearance could alter the grim destiny Redwood seemed bound to. She clung to that fragile hope as she drifted into a restless sleep, not yet aware of how deeply Frank would become entangled in her life, and the enormous gamble that would follow. Morning in Redwood was a quiet affair. With water so scarce, there was no reason to waste precious moisture or energy. The tribe functioned on minimal noise and low activity to conserve resources during the sweltering day. Even the roosters from old times were extinct in this region, so the dawn was punctuated only by hushed voices and the rustling of canvas tarps that provided meager shade. Mia woke to the smell of boiled roots and the distant sound of children playing. She rose and exited her hut, blinking against the already bright sunlight. Her father was standing near a small wooden table set outside, rummaging through medical supplies. Once, Redwood had a small clinic, but repeated raids had stripped it of crucial inventory. Now they had only a box of battered bandages, a few antibiotic pills, and some analgesic creams. "Morning, Father," Mia greeted. Eamon barely looked up. "Mia," he said, voice strained, "see if you can find any more cloth scraps. We need to bundle these medication bottles so they don't crack." She nodded, heading toward a communal storage hut on the far side of the settlement. The walkway there was busy with tribe members collecting their rations of water from the newly delivered tanks provided by Janko. The tanks were battered metal containers stamped with an unfamiliar logo. They looked suspicious, but Redwood had no room for complaint. One of the tribe's elders, a woman named Talia, approached Mia. "Child, you've heard your father's decision, yes?" Mia's throat constricted. "About me and Janko?" Talia nodded sadly. "He believes it's the only way to save us from the coming drought. From the sickness, I'm sorry." Mia swallowed. She wanted to respond, but her words tangled in her mouth, so she merely offered a faint bow and continued on her way, ignoring the knowing looks of other tribe members. Some pitied her, others seemed almost relieved that they themselves weren't chosen to bear the sacrifice. Inside the storage hut, the air was cool and smelled of damp, rotted wood. She rummaged around for anything resembling cloth, eventually settling on a few tattered remnants of old shirts. As she worked, her thoughts drifted to Frank. He might come here to trade, or maybe he'd decide Redwood wasn't worth the hassle. She considered the possibility that he could help her, though she had no idea how. Halfway through bundling some spare jars, she heard a voice behind her. "Mia." She turned to see her friend, Oren, a lanky teen with dusty blonde hair who often worked the fields. He looked nervous. "I just saw a man at the gate, wearing a jacket, carrying a rifle. He said his name is Frank. He wants to speak to your father." Her heart gave a small jolt. "Did we let him in?" Oren nodded, shifting anxiously. "Yes, but the older men are keeping watch on him. He's waiting with your father now." Mia quickly set down the cloth scraps and hurried out. Crossing the dusty courtyard, she spotted Frank standing near Eamon. Several tribe members formed a semicircle around them, some carrying makeshift spears. Janko's newly delivered firearms were locked away out of sight on Janko's instructions. Frank stood calmly, offering Eamon a small packet of seeds. "They're from a greenhouse I raided a few months back," he said in a measured tone. "Could be valuable in the right hands." Eamon eyed the seeds suspiciously. "We have new seeds from Janko already." Frank did not press further. He turned slightly, scanning the faces of Redwood. His gaze landed on Mia, and for a moment a flicker of relief crossed his features. She stepped forward. "Father, this is Frank," she said softly. "Hmm." Eamon drew himself up. He was a tall man with broad shoulders, though the lines of worry on his face had deepened in recent weeks. "Frank, yes, I remember you from years ago. You tried to sell us some old mechanical parts." Frank shrugged. "They were salvageable. Anyway, I'm traveling, looking for a place to rest a few days. I can pay for my keep, seeds, manual labor, or I can help train your people with firearms." Eamon's eyes narrowed. He glanced at the small crowd. The Redwood tribe was never one to turn away help lightly, especially not in these dire times. "We have to be careful," he said slowly. "We accepted Janko's supplies on certain conditions. He might see your presence as a threat." A hush fell over the onlookers at the mention of Janko. Mia could sense the tension in the air. Janko's name was enough to instill fear, even in Redwood's proud warriors. Frank kept his voice level. I'm not here to cross Janko, or Redwood for that matter. I just need a place to rest. Eamon studied him, his gaze lingering on the rifle strapped to Frank's back. After a moment, he turned to the tribe. He can stay 2 nights, food and water at half rations. He must surrender his weapons if he's to sleep inside our walls. Frank hesitated. That's a tough bargain. You'll get them back when you buy them, Eamon said. Otherwise, we can't guarantee your safety. A silent standoff ensued. Finally, Frank unstrapped his rifle and laid it on the ground. He took out a small revolver from a hip holster, along with a dagger. Eamon motioned for one of the tribesmen to collect the items. The crowd dispersed once Eamon waved them away, leaving only a handful of curious onlookers. Mia lingered, heart fluttering in her chest. Frank gave her a brief, subtle nod, and she wondered if he might try to speak with her in private. Indeed, as Eamon walked back toward the center of the settlement, Frank trailed behind. Mia followed at a distance. She watched as her father gave Frank directions to a small lean-to near the communal goat pen. Little more than a space with a roof, but at least it would provide shade. Once Eamon departed, Frank turned to see Mia standing there with an uncertain expression. He approached. "Looks like I'm in," he murmured. She glanced around to ensure no one was eavesdropping. "I didn't think you'd actually come." He gave a wry shrug. "I said I'd think about it. Figured Redwood might need a little help, and I sure could use some rest." Mia swallowed, glancing toward her father's retreating form. She lowered her voice. "Look, about Janko. There's something you should know." Frank's expression hardened. "He forced you folks into some twisted deal?" She nodded, a lump forming in her throat. "He demanded to marry me in exchange for supplies. He's returning in about a month for the wedding." For a moment, Frank said nothing. Then he exhaled, rubbing a hand over his stubble. "That's low, even by post-collapse standards." She sighed, fighting back tears of frustration. "I don't want this, but I have no choice. If I refuse, Redwood loses everything." Frank looked troubled. "I've seen forced marriages before, but it never ends well. Janko's men, they'll treat your people like property." Mia caught the tremor in her voice. "I know. I can't let that happen." "But what can I do?" He paused, glancing around to ensure no one was overhearing them. "Are you sure there's no other way? Could Redwood pay him back in a different form? Or find allies?" She let out a humorless laugh. "Allies? Redwood is too remote, and everyone else is dealing with their own crises. My father told me we owe Janko a debt of survival." Frank's gaze grew intense. "Then you plan to go through with it?" She looked at him, feeling an odd heat on her cheeks. "Last night I almost thought, maybe you could—" She trailed off, mortified to realize she'd been about to blurt that insane plan aloud, that if a man took her virginity, Janko would consider her impure and might annul the deal. But it felt manipulative, especially with someone she barely knew. And what if it didn't work? She closed her mouth, shaking her head. Never mind. Frank didn't press her, but the concern on his face deepened. "If you need help, Mia, ask. I don't have much, but I don't like seeing good people suffer." She bit her lip, torn between shame and a flicker of hope. Was it right to drag him into Redwood's mess? But she had no illusions. Janko was cruel and cunning. She'd heard rumors that he demanded unwavering loyalty from his wives, and that none of them had lasted very long. A few moments later, Orrin arrived with a small jug of water and a cloth for Frank. They exchanged polite nods. Mia stepped back, letting the conversation slip into mundane pleasantries. Her mind raced with the unspoken question, could Frank be the key to breaking Janko's hold on Redwood? Yet, a twinge of guilt pricked her. She was about to place her own well-being above that of the entire tribe, potentially causing chaos if Janko's demands were thwarted. Redwood needed this alliance, as twisted as it was, but she refused to be some warlord's toy. Mia walked away, her heart throbbing with conflicting thoughts. She needed a plan, something that would keep Redwood safe while freeing her from a fate worse than death. In the back of her mind, a desperate idea formed. If she rendered herself unfit for Janko's standards, perhaps he'd back out. But the price of that action weighed heavily. That night, she lay awake again, mulling over the precarious line between saving her tribe and saving herself. She had no clear solution. But with Frank's arrival, she felt a slim chance that the bleak path ahead might fork into something else, something that didn't involve sacrificing her future on a warlord's whim. The next few days passed in a tense lull. Frank helped around Redwood where he could, repairing fences, fortifying huts against potential raids, and showing a few young men how to clean and maintain the firearms Janko had delivered, though without any live rounds to practice. At first, Redwood's people eyed him suspiciously, but as he offered his labor freely, a cautious acceptance began to form. Mia observed him from a distance, intrigued by the easy rapport he developed with Oren and a handful of other teenagers. Frank showed them how to disassemble a rifle, how to check for rust, and how to store ammunition safely, skills that would have been second nature in the old military. Redwood's older hunters, however, kept their distance. They were not fond of newcomers, especially not ones who brought modern ways into their traditional spear and bow approach. Despite the mild sense of acceptance, a dark cloud still loomed over the settlement in the shape of Janko's impending return. Chief Amon, realizing that word might reach Janko about Frank's presence, decided to meet with Mia privately. It happened on the third morning, just after sunrise. Amon summoned Maya to a small structure that served as Redwood's modest council hall. Inside, the battered wooden table took center stage, flanked by chairs that had seen better days. Amon stood, arms folded, tension in every line of his posture. "Mia," he began, voice grave, "you know I've done my best for our people, for you." She nodded silently. His eyes flickered with regret. "Janko will not look kindly on discovering an armed outsider has been in Redwood. We must tread carefully. I need you to speak with Frank. See what his intentions are, if he plans on staying longer or if he's simply passing through." She swallowed. "Yes, Father, I can ask." He lowered his voice. "I will not have Redwood's survival jeopardized by a single traveler. The arrangement with Janko is crucial." Mia felt a lump in her throat. "That arrangement is me, isn't it?" She stared at her father, hoping for some sign that maybe he'd reconsider. Amon's shoulders slumped slightly. "I have to protect the tribe. When Janko returns, we must honor our agreement." Tears pricked the corners of Mia's eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. "I understand," she said softly, though her heart twisted in anguish. With that, she left, sensing no further conversation would change her father's mind. In the courtyard, she found Frank teaching Oren how to tie a secure knot with rope fragments. She waited until the lesson was done, then signaled Frank to follow her to a quieter spot beneath a makeshift awning that shielded them from the relentless sun. Frank sat on a cracked wooden bench, while Mia stood, arms crossed. She spoke in a low tone. "My father wants me to ask about your plans. He's worried Janko will see you as a threat." Frank nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. "I get it. I was planning to move on soon anyway. 2 nights turned into 3, but I can tell Redwood's uneasy about me." Mia clenched her fists, then slowly released them. "Frank, I don't know how to say this, but I need your help." His expression hardened with concern. "Name it." She glanced around, ensuring they were alone. "Janko's returning soon, within a month, maybe less. When he does, he'll expect me to be pure. That's part of his twisted condition. If I'm not, he might back out of the deal. The tribe would lose supplies and probably face retaliation." Frank's eyes narrowed. "That's a dangerous plan, Mia. If Janko feels cheated, he could decide to retaliate even worse. He might just kill the tribe and take back the supplies." She looked at the ground. "I know, but I can't become his property. I've heard the rumors of what happened to his previous wives. None survived. None." Her voice trembled. I'm terrified. I'd rather face his anger than be locked away in his camp." Frank sighed, running a hand through his short hair. "You're caught between 2 nightmares. But asking me to—" He paused, searching for words. Heat flushed her face. "I don't want to manipulate you. I just don't know another way. If you take my innocence, maybe Janko will consider the arrangement null." Silence hung between them, thick with tension. Finally, Frank spoke, voice quiet. "Mia, that's not a choice to be made lightly. You barely know me. And doing this might put Redwood in even greater danger. What if Janko punishes the entire tribe?" She swallowed back tears. "I've thought of that. But if I go to Janko willingly, I know my fate is sealed, and Redwood will effectively be under his control forever. If I ruin his twisted contract, it might at least force him to negotiate differently, or not at all. Frank exhaled slowly. I'm not sure it's that simple. He might see it as betrayal by Redwood. He might come here, guns blazing. Mia's shoulders slumped. She knew he was right, yet she had no other solutions. What would you do? She asked, voice trembling. He frowned, eyes flicking over the settlement. I'd try to find a bigger stick, some leverage, maybe something that forces Janko to back off without needing you to sacrifice yourself like that. A spark of hope fluttered in her chest. Leverage? Like what? Frank leaned back, thinking. Information, blackmail, alliances with other tribes who hate Janko. Or if we could prove to Janko that Redwood's not worth the cost of a fight, but that would require something Redwood might not have. She bit her lip. We're poor in everything except the redwood forest itself. Frank nodded, and Janko has the edge with resources, manpower, and fear. People say he keeps a hidden lab, some leftover pre-collapse facility where he's experimenting on folks. I don't know if that rumor is true, but if we had proof, maybe we could bring a bigger force down on him. Mia's mind whirled with the mention of a lab. She'd heard faint whispers of such a place, stories of horrific experiments to breed radiation-immune warriors or to test biological weapons. It sounded too monstrous to be real, but in this new world, monstrous had become normal for some warlords. Then we need proof, she said. How do we even begin to find it? Frank spread his hands helplessly. That's the problem. I don't know where it is, and I'm just one drifter. Even if we did find evidence, we'd need some authority to act on it, like a bigger settlement with real firepower or an old world bunkered faction. Redwood alone can't take on Janko's army. Mia's shoulders tensed. So you're saying there's no hope? He shook his head. No, I'm not saying that. But we can't rely on a single plan, especially one as dangerous as making you impure in Janko's eyes. If that goes wrong, Redwood pays the price. A bitter wave of despair washed over her. She felt cornered, as though every path led to disaster. Then what can we do? Frank reached out tentatively, resting a hand on her shoulder. Let's keep digging for information. Maybe Redwood's scouts know something about Janko's operations. We still have time before he returns. If we figure out how to expose him or rally allies. She stared at him, trying to quell the rising panic. All right, she whispered. I'll try. But if we can't find anything, I can't face him. I'd rather die. Frank's jaw tightened. Don't talk like that. We'll figure something out. Mia nodded, though her heart felt heavy. She silently prayed that fate would provide some clue, some thread of hope, to pull Redwood free from Janko's grip, without condemning her to the warlord's cruelty. Late afternoon sun burned mercilessly above Redwood, turning the dusty ground into an oven. Most tribe members took shelter indoors or under woven canopies, waiting out the worst of the heat. However, Oren approached Mia, who was busy near the goat pen refilling water troughs. Mia, he said, shading his eyes with his hand, Frank wants to talk to us at the south fence, or bin. She nodded, curiosity piqued. Gathering her courage, she finished tending to the goats, then followed Oren to the southern edge of the settlement. This section was less fortified, with broken bits of chain-link fence and rotted wooden stakes. Beyond lay a stretch of cracked earth that disappeared into hazy distance. Frank stood there, wearing a wide-brimmed hat someone had lent him, scanning the horizon with binoculars. He handed them to Mia as she approached. Look out there, just beyond the ridge, he said. Mia squinted through the binoculars. At first, she saw nothing but shimmering heat. Then a glint of metal caught her eye, a partial structure, maybe a collapsed tower or a scrap of a building. Some old ruin, she guessed? Frank nodded. I think it's an abandoned pre-collapse research station or something along those lines. I asked a few older Redwood folks about it, but they just said it's haunted. They claim scavengers who go there never return. Oren chimed in. I heard rumors about that place too. The sunken lab, some call it. My mother told me it used to be fenced off by the government before the collapse. Frank's eyes flickered. If Janko's rumored to be experimenting on people, he'd need a secure location with leftover equipment. An old government facility fits the bill. Mia felt her pulse quicken. Are you saying that place might be Janko's hidden lab? Frank shrugged. Could be, I'm not certain. but it's suspicious. No other warlord in the region has both the resources and the interest in pre-collapse tech like Janko does. If I wanted to do shady experiments without prying eyes, I'd pick a remote site. That ruin is a good candidate. A gust of hot wind whipped across them, stinging Mia's cheeks with grit. She lowered the binoculars, meeting Frank's gaze. We should go check it out. Oren's eyes widened. Are you crazy? That's miles away. And if people vanish there? Frank nodded grimly. We'd have to be careful, but if it really is Janko's lab, there might be physical evidence, enough to blow the lid on whatever he's doing. Maybe we can use that as leverage. Fear churned in Mia's stomach. Venturing beyond Redwood's perimeter was dangerous. Wild raiders, mutated creatures, and harsh environmental conditions made travel treacherous. Yet the thought of an alternative to Janko's forced marriage gave her courage. I'll go, she said softly, but with determination. I want to see it myself. Oren looked torn. Mia, your father will never allow this. Not after he's already arranged your, she set her jaw. He won't be able to stop me if I sneak out. Redwood's future depends on us finding a solution. Frank glanced around, ensuring no watchers were too close. We'll need supplies, a couple of canteens of water, some rations, and a way to defend ourselves if we run into trouble. Mia grimaced. You turned in your weapons at the gate. My father locked them up. A hint of a smile tugged at Frank's lips. Don't worry, I still have a few tricks up my sleeve. And from the looks of it, Redwood's got a small armory courtesy of Janko. Maybe we can borrow a pistol or two without raising alarms. Oren chewed his lip, glancing warily at the settlement behind them. When are you planning to do this? Tomorrow night, Frank replied. We can slip out after dark. The nights are cool enough for travel, and we can avoid Redwood's daytime watchers. The young man grimaced. I want to help, but Mia placed a hand on Oren's shoulder. We need your help. If you can create a diversion or at least keep people from noticing, that would be enough. Oren looked unconvinced, but eventually he nodded reluctantly. All right, I'll try. They parted ways, each bearing the weight of the plan. Mia's heart pounded with a mixture of dread and determination. She spent the remainder of the day organizing her minimal belongings, a small satchel, a water skin, and a handful of dried jerky. That evening she feigned exhaustion and retired early to her hut. Her father barely looked at her, consumed as he was by tribe duties. Tension remained thick in the air. She suspected Eamon sensed her unease, but he said nothing, perhaps hoping she would quietly resign herself to the future. Midnight arrived. Mia slipped from her hut, creeping across the silent settlement. She found Frank waiting near the goat pen. The goat stirred in mild curiosity but did not bleat loudly. Mia had always had a calming presence with animals. Frank handed her a small pistol with a single magazine of ammo. It's from the armory, he whispered. Had to be real careful not to alert your father. Mia's hand trembled as she accepted it. She'd never held a real gun before, only the old hunting rifles Redwood sometimes used. The pistol's weight felt ominous. You ready? Frank murmured. She nodded, forcing herself to stand tall. Yes. They slipped out through the gap in the southern fence that Mia knew too well, carefully avoiding the watchtower. Oren had offered to stand guard in that tower tonight, ensuring the other watchers wouldn't notice anything suspicious. Once beyond Redwood's boundaries, the land stretched out in a canvas of moonlit emptiness. The sky was clear, revealing thousands of stars. A faint breeze caressed Mia's hair, carrying the scent of dry earth and a distant promise of desert wildflowers. Frank guided them southward, occasionally stopping to check a handheld compass. Mia felt the hush of the night pressing down. With each step, Redwood's silhouette receded behind them, replaced by the looming unknown. They trekked for hours in relative silence, broken only by the shuffle of their feet and the faint clang of gear. The temperature dropped significantly. Mia clutched her thin jacket, grateful the scorching daytime heat was gone. Her mind churned with questions. Would they really find Janko's operation here? If they did, could they gather enough evidence to blackmail him? And if they didn't, had they risked everything for nothing? By the time the first hints of dawn touched the horizon, they reached the top of a ridge overlooking a sunken stretch of land. Mia peered down and sucked in a breath. A collapsed structure sprawled there, what remained of a large rectangular facility, half buried in rubble. Concrete walls jutted out at odd angles, and piles of twisted metal rods glinted in the early light. A sagging chain-link fence ringed the area, patches of barbed wire still clinging to the top. "Looks like an old government lab to me," Frank whispered, scanning with binoculars. "Pre-collapse signage. See that faint emblem on the wall? Some old agency. Probably important." Mia squinted. She could just make out the letters CTRA or something like that, partially worn away. Frank retrieved a battered pair of gloves from his pack. "Let's get closer. Find a safe way in." They descended the ridge carefully, stepping around rocks that threatened to roll. At the bottom, they crouched behind a row of dried bushes near the perimeter fence. Mia's heart pounded. If Janko or his men truly used this place, they might have posted guards. Sure enough, as the sun rose higher, they spotted a single guard patrolling near the main entrance. He wore dusty fatigues and carried a rifle, pacing in a bored manner. Frank pointed to a section of fence where the metal was curled upward. "We can slip under there if we're quiet." Mia nodded, adrenaline coursing through her. This was it. No turning back. She followed Frank, crawling on her belly across the gravelly ground. They slid beneath the fence, mindful not to snag clothes or gear on the rusted wire. The guard remained oblivious, humming a faint tune. Inside the perimeter, tall weeds and rubble offered partial cover. A cluster of old shipping containers lay stacked near a loading dock. Frank angled toward them, keeping his body low. Mia followed, heart thudding so loudly she feared the guard might hear. They reached the containers without incident. There, they paused to take stock of the area. Two more guards emerged from a side door, chatting briefly. They didn't appear vigilant, likely assuming no one would dare approach this place. Frank waited until they disappeared back inside. Then he motioned to Mia. "We'll try that side entrance," he whispered. "Maybe we can find some records or lab rooms." She nodded, steeling herself. If this was indeed Janko's base, they had to gather whatever evidence they could. Photographs, data logs, anything. Creeping along the cracked concrete loading bay, they approached the door. It stood slightly ajar, metal squeaking in the breeze. Mia's pulse raced as Frank gently pushed it open, revealing a dim corridor strewn with debris. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered sporadically, fed by an ancient generator that coughed out a faint hum. They slipped inside, the stale air thick with dust and the stench of chemicals. Broken glass crunched underfoot. Along one wall, faded posters featured diagrams of gene structures and warnings about contamination protocols. Mia's breath caught in her throat. Whatever had been studied here, it was advanced, far beyond Redwood's limited understanding of biology. The old world might have had technology that rivaled anything warlords could dream up. Suddenly, Frank held up a hand, halting her. He pointed to a door on the left. Through the narrow window, they glimpsed medical equipment, tables, monitors, tubes, and ominous dark stains on the tiled floor. He motioned for her to stay low while he inched forward to peek through the window. After a tense moment, he turned back, face grim. "This is bad," he mouthed, scarcely audible. "Come see." Mia approached, carefully peering inside. Rows of cots lined the room, makeshift restraints attached. A few were overturned, a few were stained dark red. She stifled a gasp of horror. The devices strewn about looked like intravenous machines, as though someone had been siphoning blood or injecting substances. Frank's jaw clenched. This is definitely not a normal clinic. Something heinous happened here. Mia's stomach roiled. She thought of Janko's rumored wives, how they never survived. Could it be that this was their end? She forced herself to remain calm. "We need proof." Frank nodded, glancing around. "I'll bet they keep records somewhere, a computer terminal maybe. Let's keep moving, but carefully." They continued down the corridor, passing rooms filled with dusty glassware, toppled cabinets, and ominous equipment. Occasionally, they heard voices echoing from deeper in the facility, footsteps crossing metal catwalks above. The place was bigger than they had expected, with multiple wings branching off. At last, they discovered a small security office with a flickering terminal. The door was locked, but Frank tried the handle with gentle pressure. It rattled uselessly. Mia noticed a dusty vent cover near the floor, partially dislodged. They exchanged a glance. "You're smaller," Frank whispered. "You can slip in there." Mia swallowed hard, nodding. She wriggled out of her jacket and handed it to Frank. Then she lowered herself prone on the filthy tiles and crawled into the vent. It was cramped and claustrophobic, with a metallic smell of rust. She pushed forward, ignoring the urge to panic as the enclosed space tightened around her shoulders. After a few feet, the vent turned sharply, opening into the security office. She emerged behind a desk, knocking over a plastic cup that rolled with a hollow clatter. Freezing in place, she waited, listening for any alarmed voices. None came. Cautiously, she unlocked the door from the inside. Frank slipped in and quietly shut it behind him. They both eyed the dusty terminal and a battered keyboard. "Let's see if we can power it up," Frank muttered, pressing a few keys. The screen crackled, lines of code flickering across a battered interface. Mia watched anxiously as he navigated rudimentary menus. Many files were corrupted, but some folders remained intact. They read labels like test subject data, experiment logs, genetic samples. A chill ran down her spine. Frank's face darkened as he opened one of the logs. It listed details of abducted individuals, experiments with blood transfusions, and attempts to isolate a radiation immunity gene. On the last few lines mentioned success in harvesting certain genetic materials from young, untainted female subjects. Her stomach lurched. This is monstrous." Frank copied what files he could onto a small storage chip he carried, something from the old world that might still function on other devices. Suddenly, footsteps sounded in the corridor outside. The doorknob rattled. Mia and Frank exchanged a panicked look. They scrambled to hide behind a toppled filing cabinet as the door swung open. A figure, "Hello again, story lovers. As you journey through Shadows Over Redwood, you'll watch Mia risk everything, her freedom, her life, and her heart, to uncover Janko's sinister secrets. And trust me, the explosive twist in the final scene is something you won't want to miss. Just when you think you've predicted the outcome, Mia makes a daring move that changes the game forever. Curious? Tune into the full story to see how alliances shift, hidden labs come to light, and how one desperate stand against tyranny can spark hope in the darkest of times. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell so you'll be the first to know when we upload more intense, action-packed tales. Feel free to share your predictions in the comments. Do you think Mia's gamble will pay off? Let us know, and happy listening.